Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on this podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that is transferable and then help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. And today we want to discuss producing great results that would lend toward maximizing business value during tough and challenging times. If you've been a business owner long enough, if you are a business owner long enough, you're going to at some point experience a tough patch, and which could be due to either internal or external or both factors. And it can be tough during those times to remain focused and keep your eye on the ball to produce those great results that you are expected to return and you want to return, and so on and so forth. And to execute on to keep your long-term strategy for maximizing the value in view and continuing to execute on it. So that's our topic for today. We want to talk about delivering great results in challenging times. And we're very excited to have with us today Bruce Cazenave, founder and principal of Inflection Management. Bruce has decades of experience as a CEO and board member with an impressive record of achieving exceptional results in growth, turnaround situations, and mature businesses across numerous global public and private companies. He's proven track record, proven ability in scaling business, not just domestically, but globally, leading in transformation, be it digital transformation or whatever other kind of transformation that needs to take place in order to optimize the business model and then maximize the business value. And he's done this for iconic brands, recognizable brands such as Nautilus, Timberland, and Black & Decker. So Bruce, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. Great to join you and Walter today.
Yeah, Bruce, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. So
absolutely.
Why don't we start with, based on the introduction Pat just gave, can you share with us a period, your ton of experience, but maybe just select one period that comes to mind when it was really challenging for you to produce the kind of great results that you expect to produce?
Yeah, I think, thank you, Walter. I think probably a lot of what I've done is going into very distressed companies that are having trouble, revenues declining, employees being kind of demoralized, and a lot of things, whether it be internal workings not happening or environmental market changes that created a disruption to their business. But I would say probably the one that sticks out most in my mind was actually the first turnaround that I was involved in after many years at Black & Decker, and was Timberland. And it involved going into a company that had lost about 80% of its value, market cap. It was publicly traded at the time. This was mid-90s. And there was a lot of the things I talked about: borderline bankruptcy, demoralized employees, and things like that. And I think the thing that made it even more challenging was the founder, CEO, had brought in a number of executives from Fortune 500 companies, Procter & Gamble, Intel, et cetera, to try to fix the company and build it. And a lot of those executives didn't make it. I was one of them from Black & Decker at the time. And out of 12 executives that came in, only 3 of us lasted more than 9 months. And of course, I was there 5 years, continuing to turn the business around. So I think the layering in of some of those issues, those people on top of process disciplines that didn't exist, and creating misalignment with between functions was compounding the issue. So I think that would probably be the most difficult one. We had a huge success in the first 2 years. The stock basically it tripled, I think, or more than tripled in the first 18 months. And then it split. And then it went up again up to like $70, up from 15. So a lot of, breaking down the barriers and doing things like that is what was the key success to the success of that, and unraveling some of the things that have been put in place by some of these executives that didn't have the experience of working in a, let's call it, less than disciplined environment.
Hey, okay, Bruce, that's fantastic. That's a great place to start. Let's give listeners we want to give listeners practical advice, and you've got a ton of it. And advice in our situation that would translate from leading larger businesses that you've been involved with in the past to smaller, mid-level businesses, which our listeners are running for the most part. If we could get to 3 things that you would advise business owners to focus on during these tough times, like you just mentioned, there were probably a lot of things, but you probably kept it simple because you're smart. And if there were 3 things that just kind of rise above everything else during those tough times in order for you to deliver those or get back on track to begin with, and then deliver the expected results, that would be fantastic.
Okay, well, that's really the core of kind of what I do. And I'd say, Pat, it's a great question, and I'll elaborate on some of the transferability of these things from larger companies in different situations, different industries. I'd say the 3 things are: the first is having a clean and clear mission and communicate it. What is the mission of the company or the business? Okay, and again, this pertains to no matter what business you're in, what size of business you're in, public, private, whatever, having a clear mission statement and then communicating that very effectively to your employees. When you can do that, you basically start to get what I call the cylinders hitting on all the cylinders. You start to get employee engagement. You start to get growth starts to come in. You start to get retention. You start to be able to draw more talent, and the thing just starts feeding itself. So that's the first thing I would say, is have a clear mission and then communicate it very extensively and regularly to the employee base. The second, I'm sorry.
Just a second. Let me just interject something there that comes to mind. Well, first off, we preach that ourselves continually. But it sounds like Patrick Lencioni's, and you're probably familiar with him and his team. They talk about organizational clarity, and organizational clarity being clear mission, vision, and values. And then to your second point there about communicating it. And he just encourages over communicating that mission, vision, and values. So because we tend to forget it.
Yeah. No, it's critical. It's very foundational, is what I would say, Pat. It starts there, and you really get particularly if you're in a difficult situation with employees or wondering, is there going to be a paycheck in 2 weeks and things like that, having that mission to say, okay, there's the hill, and this is how we're going to go take that hill, and so that's key. I'd say the second thing is to simplify, adapt, and innovate. And that's a little bit of 3 different, very distinct activities, if you will. But I'll start with simplification. Typically in a lot of the companies, and it hasn't been that I've joined through these turnarounds, there isn't a cookbook. You can't just say, okay, here's the cookbook. This is what you're going to do. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So you basically start off, it's asking a lot of questions, coming in as an outsider, as a CEO, come in and ask a lot of questions. What's working? What isn't working? What do you think we can do better? And so forth like that. And it's usually breakfast, lunch, and dinners, one-on-one with some of the key people, and even down the ranks in the organization. So you get to the point in simplification where it's not only what you do, which could be part of the mission vision that we just talked about, but it's also what I call how you do what you do. Okay, so it's the whole end to end. Okay, this is what we're delivering, a product, a service, a meal, whatever it is, to a customer. And here's where it starts. And then look at all of the things in between the beginning and the end of that to a customer interaction, and making that as simple as possible, looking for ways where things are being trapped, either time or cost or non-value added activities are being trapped in that spectrum. Okay, so that's the simplification. The adoption and adapting to changes is so, the changes are happening so fast, and it doesn't matter what industry, in my opinion, that you're in. You know, you could be in selling computers, or selling software, or software as a service, or putting food in a restaurant on the tables. You know, changes are happening faster than ever. Technology, taste, etc., competitive disruption, and so forth. So the ability to adapt, you know, your business model and or everything your employees are working on is important. So I'd say that's another key aspect. And then the third aspect of that would be the innovation. And that's usually you have to keep things fresh and find is this new product or new services to stay in front of what you're offering to the customer, you know, because they expect, you know, different things to come from you. And I think it's the idea of instilling the thought that it's okay to try things that might not work. Put something on the menu if you're a restaurant owner, owner of a company that has restaurants. Put something on the menu, try it, but be prepared to take the exit ramp if it doesn't work. You know, but you try it, you try new things and stuff like that, and you'll get an appreciation from your customer base on that. So I'd say simplify, adapt, and innovate. Those are all three things packaged up into one. And then I have one third one, which is the thing I would say is very transferable, and stop me if I'm going too much into this. And that is spend the time, the owners and founders of the company spend really good quality time doing what I was saying about asking questions of the business, encouraging initiative, creating positive energy, and doing things like that. And most importantly, celebrate even the smallest wins, you know, with the employees. And I think that continues to build. That's more of the subjective types of things, or way that a founder or owner can operate. Those would be my three suggestions.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, in regard to the questions, that reminds me of another somewhat classic business book, and it was written by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan, Execution, and how they pretty much said the same thing you just said, is how critical it is to systematize exposing reality. And the way you're going to do that is to systematize and take initiative in asking questions and listening, not just asking questions, but then sincerely listening and sincerely wanting to know the answers to the questions.
Well said. Yeah, that's key. It's the listening skills and you know, asking good questions, and it's questions sometimes that are, you know, like trying to understand what's around the next corner. You know, what is the next thing that's going to come at the company that we need to be prepared to? And some of it could be, you know, a growth. You know, companies go through milestones where, you know, if they're not prepared to go through the next level of growth or the next level of complexity and doing it effectively, then many of them will go sideways or go backwards and then regroup. In fact, Timberland did that, and a number that, you know, where they grew to, you know, $600 million and the wheels came off, then they had to step back and then we start building it back up. And so I think those kinds of things, trying to see where the next level of challenges are going to be and anticipating and building the infrastructure, whether it be talent or facilities or whatever it is, in order to move through those barriers seamlessly.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Pat's one of Pat's favorite sayings he just shared with you is expose reality. But it's interesting to me, a lot of the small business owners we work with, a lot of them, it's almost like they don't want to know sometimes. They've the business is moving along. They're hesitant. They're a lot of businesses we work with, they're good businesses, but they could go to the next step. But I think, for a lot of people, they're satisfied with maybe the income they're making and the way their life is. So that's fine. But the clients we work with who really want to go to that next step, I think embracing the type of things you're talking about is critical, and that's what gets them to that next step.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said, Walter. I think part of what I've had to do in the past, whether it be turning around a company in order to sell it, or just for shareholder value returns and so forth, I think it'd be interesting, and I think this transfers very well to the small and medium-sized businesses very well, is, think about if you are thinking about an event where you're going to sell or transition somehow to another family member like you guys do so well. It's think about what, from an outside perspective, what are the key, what's the value of the business? Some people will look at growth trajectories. Some people will look at profitability. Some people will look at the value proposition. How unique is what your company doing in the marketplace or even in the local area, those kinds of things. And then I think, having a story, I think always is important. For a public company, it was really important that we had a story, or any other public company has that with story. This is what we're here to do. This is how we do what we do and how we're different and so forth. And I think that those kinds of things pertain to any size business. If somebody's thinking about marketing their business, and they start thinking about what are those potential buyers going to be interested in, then I think you can tick down those things, and they might be a different set of priorities. Like I said, some are growth then profitability, and it could be or profitability then growth. But I think that having that uniqueness and differentiation, and then also the ability to have shown that your company has taken an initiative and executed it well. I think this comes back to Pat's point about execution. If you say, okay, this is our strategy, the whole company is mobilized around this big thing, and this is how we executed it, and this is the successes that we realize as a result of it. That is one of those things that a lot of investors and potential buyers of a company will look at and say, wow, that company knows how to make stuff happen. And that's something you can't put a multiple of EBITDA on, or a multiple of revenue or something like that. That's just something that's worth something to buyers, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you consider that a cultural, almost a cultural characteristic then?
Yeah, I think it's, and there's certain, I know from talking to so many different investors, particularly at Nautilus, when we're doing road shows and talking to all kinds of investors of all sizes and shareholders. The ones that intrigued me the most were the ones that, well, first of all, that asked really good questions, kind of a thing. That's always helpful. That means that they've taken the time to study the company and ask good questions, and then and that keeps us on our toes, which is good too, as executives of the company. But I think the ones that made the connection between the culture and the people and the success of the business from the metric standpoint, whatever the financials are, growth, KPIs, whatever they are, that look at say, okay, this company won, like Nautilus did in 10 years in a row, even after I left, workplace of the year or something for the Southwest Washington, Oregon area. And they look at that and they say, okay, here's a company that is really taking care of employees, that, the talent is there. They're making good stuff happen. Hey, by the way, and look at all the results they're having in terms of share price gains. So I think that connection, if that's what you're asking, Pat, I think that connection is something that not everybody thinks about, but certain more, I'd say more sophisticated buyers and investors and shareholders will definitely factor that in.
Yeah, there's that aspect of that piece. There's also what you mentioned earlier, Bruce, that I termed as exposing reality with great questions and really wanting questions. Again, going back to Bossidy and Sharon's book and proposition, they would say that if you're going to execute strategy, you've got to first expose reality. And so they were proposing that this too should become part of your culture, that people they're not, your team is not afraid of communicating what reality is, because the leaders in the organization, they want to know what reality is so that they can create a strategy that's actually going to work long term.
Yeah.
And that becomes part of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I would add a little bit to that too, that sometimes in Bossidy and these folks, ran big companies, right? Very much almost like a wind tunnel where everything was just humming and so forth. You're just looking for next things to grow into and stuff like that. But I would say that, some of what happens sometimes, particularly with a lot of success, is that you can, and this is where the transparency and really looking hard in the mirror comes in, is complacency can set in. Okay. And I've seen that so many times, where, everything's going well, everything's going, and all of a sudden there's this just, okay, we're just going to go along. And before you know it, something comes in and just everything goes sideways and the company has to scramble to get back on track. So I think that's some of the risks sometimes that, and again, this pertains to companies of all sizes. You can grow, you can be, very happy with how things are going, and complacency can set in. And that generally, I'd say there are times where that'll work okay, I guess. But generally, and it's been my experience, that's what you really have to watch out for. I used to tell our teams when we were at Dorel and we had turned the company around, and the headlines in the newspaper in Columbus, Indiana was "A sleeping giant has awakened," because we got the company back on its feet and going. And I said, be careful of the press, be careful of the publicity. We got to keep doing what we're doing and doing it really well, executing really well, and so forth. So, that's, I think it's a caution for anybody. I would say just be careful not to let complacency set in during those periods of really successful growth, profitability, whatever you're trying to achieve.
Bruce, that's an interesting point you just made, because I think COVID kind of exposed a lot of stuff, and it was really interesting because we were Pat and Corby and I and a few other kind of diverse professionals were doing weekly podcasts just based, just keeping people up to date on what was going on as far as rules and things like that. But, that really was a challenging time for a lot of small businesses. And it's just interesting to see that the ones who stepped up to the plate, they've been able to carry that whole transformation forward. And now that we're, a little bit back in normal times, if there's ever such a thing anymore in today's world, they're really seeing the fruits of that. And then you have the ones who are like, you know, I just can't deal with it.
Yeah.
They're gone
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think,
and in regard to complacency and all you were saying about complacency, boy, if you couldn't be complacent 20 years ago, if it wasn't a good idea then to be complacent, it's absolutely not now, because everything's changing every 15 minutes, it seems like, in regards to
yeah,
something else that you mentioned earlier, and just technology and how exponentially it just changes things continually, constantly.
yeah. Yeah, I gave a talk a few years ago at a big forecasting conference. It was this huge thing that they have in Vancouver here in Washington, and it was all about the speed of change and how to adapt to change. And I made the point to them that, and I read this somewhere, that you know how fast things have changed, that the and disruption happening. I said that the largest taxi company has no taxis. Okay, think about that. The largest accommodations company has no rooms that they own. Okay, meaning Airbnb and so forth.
Mhm.
The largest media company doesn't develop any of its own content. You know, and so those are things that just kind of came out of nowhere, right? You
Yeah.
know, in some cases in the last 5 years, in some cases it took a little bit longer than that, maybe 10. But
Mhm.
that's the speed at which things are totally changing. So you got to really be on your toes and stuff. And what I encourage our teams to do, and I do think this pertains to your clients and your listeners, is I describe the process of moving the company along two paths simultaneously. And these are typically for troubled companies, which is the ones I've been dealing with mostly all my career since early career in Black & Decker. One is you focus on making sure that your business model and your processes are all tight and operating as well as they can. You know, and if you have to make changes where stuff is not working or whatever, then you do that, but you get that base working really well. And then if you're interested in growing, then you, at the same time, you look at what's the in parallel, what's the other things that we can do to layer on top of our base business so that we can grow. Okay, so, and some of those might work and some of those might not work. You know, I always say fail fast and recover quickly. If you try something, it doesn't work, take the exit ramp and keep trying different things that you can then layer on top of a really strong base business that is that's really humming. Okay, so if you do those two things together, and maybe when first for early years and early months, it's all focused on the base business because you got to get that fixed, right? But then as that starts to work, then you can start looking at these other things that you run in parallel, growth levers that can then be assimilated into the company when they're ready to put together. So that's if people think about that, and then probably pertains to other things too, besides just business, but you know, then I think you always have the ability to have that next thing ready to drop in, you know, when you're looking for the next thing to grow with. So, and
Okay.
again, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, listen, I have a follow-up to that. You actually just answered my last question, but I have a follow-up to the last question. That takes discipline.
Yeah.
What you just described, to make sure that ops are tight for your core business, while you know, not going after every shiny object until that's in place, but then at the same time considering other shiny objects, if you will, or other things that you can layer on the business, as you put it a few minutes ago, to grow. Entrepreneurial small business owners that we work with, boy, and I'm like this, can start thinking about doing and adding other things before the operations are as tight as they need to be and should be on the core business. and
Yeah.
start moving into the thing. So the question's this, and this is the last question. How do you stay disciplined in doing that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's some of the things we talked about already. That's a great question, Pat. It's having a mission that's everybody understands it, because what that does is it gives you guardrails. Okay, so these shiny objects that are going to appear that you say, oh, we should go do this, we should do that. If they don't fall within the mission of what you're trying to do and so forth, and it could be, the mission will evolve. It needs to be constantly looked at, reevaluated, because things are going to change. The company is going to mature, so forth. So you have those guardrails that will cause you to rethink whether that shiny object fits within the mission statement. Okay, so that's a key thing, and it all comes back to having clarity on what is a company trying to do and how are they trying to get there. So I'd say that's number one. I think it's fine to look at things, because I do like to. I'm a big proponent of looking at different things, because sometimes you can triangulate an opportunity and figure out, okay, that would really work well with what our core competencies are as a business, and you can do that. So I wouldn't say don't look at things, but I would say keep the discipline comes in on being able to say, no, that doesn't quite fit, or it's not the right time for us, or it could be that we don't have the business is doing well, but we don't have the capacity to push that into our company. It would create a problem for us. Okay. And believe me, this happens to everybody. No matter, this is not just small company problem. This is large companies have the same issue, where they have call it the buffet syndrome, where there's, their eyes are bigger than their stomach, kind of a thing. And they go, oh, let's go get this, blah, 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 blah. And then before you know it, the whole company changes, and in a not a good way. So I would say that I think the other thing I would say that's part of the discipline is when you have simplicity, okay, then it helps the ability to be, so discipline isn't as hard as the word sounds, but if you would simplify things, make things very, you take out all of the noise in the business model, keep it simple, and that could be the number of products you have, the number of customers you have, the facilities you have. If you simplify to what you really need, then I think it really helps staying the course and being disciplined. And occasionally you'll need some different folks that have been there, done that, and that's kind of like why I got recruited into Timberland, was that I knew process discipline, and that's what they needed in a big way. From product development all the way through sourcing, discipline. But a lot of it was simplifying too.
Hey, Bruce, this has been a really great conversation. We really enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners found it very, very useful, as both Pat and I did too. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. I hope you have a great day. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, Walter, let me summarize something first here. So Bruce, thank you again. As Walter said, listeners, 3 things that have been advised today to focus on during tough times. Clean and clear mission statement, communicating it often and effectively. It's foundational, especially in a tough time. Then simplify, adapt, and innovate. Simplify asking a lot of questions with a goal, with a number of goals, but one goal would be to simplify operations and tighten them up, and to anticipate future change and needs, and then adapt and innovate to meet those needs, and then invest time in taking initiative to interact with employees, staff, asking questions again, celebrating wins, so on and so forth, and then look to move your business along 2 paths: current operations for your core business, tight, systematized, documented, all of that we talk about a whole lot, a strong management team, everything that you need for your core business to run smoothly. And then always be ready to listen and consider what to layer on top of that core business in order to grow into the future.
Well said. You
Okay.
said it better than I did, Pat.
Well, I don't think that's true, but so thank you, Bruce. We appreciate it. And Walter's going
You
to
got it,
go
gentlemen.
ahead and
You
wrap
got it.
up at this
Hey,
point.
Bruce, we always ask our guests 2 questions at the end. Is there
Mhm.
anything you'd like to promote, and how could our listeners get in contact with you?
Yeah, what my consulting business is Inflection Management, I think, as Pat said, and I can be reached at bruce@inflectionmgmt.com, and I help executives, think through their decisions and hopefully get to a better decision or accelerate their learning in a certain area. That's what I like to do. So happy to help if that's of value to your listeners and to your clients,
Okay.
to add on to what you guys provide as needed. So,
Okay. Let me ask you one last question. Is that the $1 million Eric Clapton guitar hanging on your wall there?
that is, I bought, or my wife got this for me at an auction with the Indianapolis Colts. The football team was having about probably 20 years ago. And there's all kinds of, it's autographed with all kinds of musicians, but I don't know who they are. So other than I see Kelly Clarkson, the rest of them, it could be, Eric Clapton. I don't know. I don't know, that, but I'm a kind of a frustrated musician. So I have various guitars and ukuleles around my office. But thank you for asking.
That's cool.
Okay, guys.
Listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860, and you can reach me at 301-951-9090. If you've benefited from today's episode, please consider liking and sharing it on social media. As always, thanks for listening. And until next time on the Exit Readiness Podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.